What's up, everybody? Welcome on in to the FanDuel PGA Q&A for this week. It's time for the Valspar Championship. That means it's also time for the Snake Pit, the tough closing 3 holes at Innisbrook's Copperhead course. Now, historically, this course plays tough overall, and that might be the case yet again this year. This event moves from mid-March to later in April. We're expected to get some pretty heavy winds. The early estimation is that you want golfers to tee off late on Thursday and early on Friday to have the best possible wind splits. But we'll talk about the course, the field, my favorite plays, my win simulations, and whatever else you want, because this is a Q&A format. So hit up the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch if you have questions for this week's event. I'm going to go over the daily fantasy slate, the betting odds on FanDuel Sportsbook, my win simulations, and again, just anything that you have for this week. For the Valspar I always call it Innisbrook, but everyone else calls it Copperhead. So question already on YouTube from Method Atlas. Where's the 2-time? I'm assuming that means tea time. Somewhere on Twitter from the PGA Tour Communications is probably where you'd get that. They also post tee times on PGAtour.com under just go to the schedule and then to the Valspar, and then you'll see a tee time listing there. I haven't had time to study it because it just came out, or at least I saw it a few minutes ago, so don't have the best feel for who got the best draws, although Ryan Palmer, someone I'm interested in, Zach Johnson is a value or possibly a long shot for betting, much more likely a top 20. So that he got a good draw. So I didn't get to check it out entirely, but that's where you would find the tee times. So I'm going to talk, as I usually do, about the field, at least the top of the field for this week. We have basically 2 standout favorites. That's Justin Thomas and Dustin Johnson. JT being 9-1. On FanDuel Sportsbook, Dustin Johnson 11-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. And then we have Corey Connors at 19-1. He's moved up since the Open. He opened, or at least when I first saw it, he was 26-1. I didn't know where that number was going to go. I assumed down, and it did, but I didn't quite expect him to leap over Victor Hovland at 21-1. Hovland was 20-1. And then we have Paul Casey, 2-time winner here, back-to-back winner at 21-1 as well. Patrick Reed, 19-1, same now as Corey Connors. Reed has fared well here. He hasn't played here a ton, but has done well at Copperhead. And overall, I think that we see just a big teardrop after DJ and JT to the rest of the field. But overall, it's a pretty solid field at the top. I have the most interest in betting on Victor Hovland at 21-1. My win simulations like him a good bit. This is a course, as I'll get into in just a second, that rewards driving accuracy less than distance, but distance is still something that's a little bit important. And Hovland has a really balanced driver. Innisbrook is the resort, Copperhead one of the courses. Yes, thanks, Mike. I just mess that up all the time. I don't know why. I think it's just the first thing that I always thought it was Innisbrook. And so I just refer to it as Innisbrook a lot, but I'm trying to get better. And it should make sense because Copperhead and the Snake Pit and the big statue. So I'm getting better about that. So I'm going to break down the course now, Copperhead, by starting with some information from Data Golf. Looking at this tool right here, what drives variation in scores. This is something that I like to start my process based on the event average versus the tour average is really what I look at. I don't like to look at single events such as the 2019 here. I like to see how this course plays and what stats are separating the scoring out. This basically tells you which stats are driving the variation in scoring, which basically means how did the guys who succeeded, how did they do it? So here we see strokes gain approach. This is what I always start with. It's about 35% with the event average, a little bit higher than the tour average at 34.7%. Not drastically so, but we see that dip in off the tee, 13.2% here at Copperhead, 15.1% on the tour average. And we see putting a little bit higher. So effectively what this kind of boils down to is less emphasis on the driver, more emphasis on the irons and the putter. And before I flip over to the course fit tool, I want to show the winning scores here. This course plays tough, and historically there hasn't actually been that much wind, and we're expected to get substantially more wind. So I think from that standpoint, this thing's going to play tough. And so that's something that we should keep in the back of our minds. Generally, for me, tougher courses require better players because in this sense, if a par four is difficult to birdie, and better players who are like longer off the tee or who putt better, if they birdie a tough par four, that is going to gain them leverage over the field, as opposed to whenever the par fours are super easy and everyone's throwing darts. Like, it's harder to separate that. Better golfers don't just automatically be in contention for eagles on par fours. So the tougher it is, the more I like to look at all around stats. But Paul Casey won in 2019 at 8 under. The year before, 10 under. 14 under for Adam Hadwin in 2017, but Charles Schwartzel 7 under. Jordan Spieth 10 under. So we're kind of looking at that 10 under range. So it's definitely not something with a ton of birdies. Another question from Mike: how about greens and regulation? Greens and regulation is basically strokes gained approach, but strokes gained approach for me is a lot better. Greens and regulation doesn't necessarily count for the size of greens. Strokes gained approach does a bit better job of showing things like that. Rough around the greens is usually plush. Sounds like you have some inside knowledge there. But yeah, I do think that strokes gained around the green is something that is relevant for this week, and it usually isn't. It is about that 14% here at Copperhead, which is roughly the tour average. Now, it's just strokes gained around the green doesn't really allow golfers to gain a bunch of strokes. Just statistically, you gain the least amount of strokes around the green because it's just your shot's 30 yards within the green and in, and then once you're on the green, it's putting. So you just can't make up a ton of leverage there unless you have like multiple holeouts. So it's hard to put strokes gained around the green at the top of the list, but it is something that kind of speaks to the overall difficulty of a course and just targeting better all-around golfers. We can see that a little bit more clearly with this course fit tool. Strokes gained around the green, strokes gained approach, and for all intents and purposes, putting. Basically, this plays as your average PGA Tour course, where you really see the differentiation is with driving distance. It's less important, not quite so much as we saw 2 weeks ago at Harbour Town, but driving accuracy significantly more important here at Copperhead compared to the PGA Tour average. So from that angle, you kind of can say, okay, the shorter hitters aren't disqualified. And sometimes in these really tough events with really long courses, you can kind of see that. We don't really have it this week. And one thing to keep in mind is there are 5 par 3s here, which is pretty rare to see. And so that again is going to speak to strokes gained approach. Your tee shot on a par 3 is counted in strokes gained approach, not off the tee, which makes a lot of sense. But from that angle, strokes gained approach it's the most important stat outside the tee box. It's the most important stat really overall. It's kind of irons and puttings. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Mike says, thanks. New to more advanced stats. Yes, more advanced stats they're not flawless, but sometimes I can hear criticisms of strokes gained, just in general, where if you miss, 8 feet in the right spot versus 8 feet from the pin in like the wrong spot, that doesn't account for things. But greens and regulation doesn't really differentiate between, having a 60-foot putt or a 6-inch putt. So that's why strokes gained approach is most important. And if you are new to advanced stats, just going back to this tool here, strokes gained putting, yes, drive for show, putt for dough. It's actually like hit your irons for show and dough, and then putt for dough as well. You can only gain so many strokes off the tee and around the green. Off the top of my head, historically, the leader in the 4 strokes gained categories for strokes gained off the tee and around the green, you can gain about 4 to 5 strokes in those stats for the field leader. For approach and putting, it's about 8 to 10. And so, usually see 10 more for like putting than just approach. But What that really means is that you can put more distance between the field if you have really good iron play, and that's why most people who talk about things, and from a data standpoint, that's why strokes gained approach is number one. And yes, even if it's not significantly more important here than it is at the tour average based on the variation tool or the course fit tool, it's still the most important tee to green stat, and it's also more predictive and more reliable week to week than it is strokes gained putting. So that's why strokes gained approach just makes a ton of sense for pretty much each and every week. There hasn't been really any courses where strokes gained approach is something that we de-emphasize. So hopefully that helps get you kickstarted into strokes gained data. Thanks for the questions, Mike. So I'm going to jump over now to my spreadsheet and look at the top of the field from a FanDuel perspective in terms of salary. This is not the straight top five in salary. I skipped over Patrick Reed, who is listed at 11,600. Reed is not quite as appealing as these golfers. They all have something intriguing about them. Justin Thomas being the odds-on favorite and the highest salaried golfer. Based on my research, that almost always means he's going to be the most popular golfer in a field. And again, we're looking at things like de-emphasizing distance and putting a lot of stock into fairways gained. That's not necessarily Justin Thomas's skill set, but one thing to keep in mind is even if strokes gained off the tee is not as important and it's more of an accuracy course, longer hitters can always club down and hit fairways. In theory, you can kind of fake and modify your game to put the ball in the right place. You can never fake distance. And so whenever there is a distance-heavy course, you kind of do have to cut out the shorter hitters. At a course that requires precision, don't just look at the fairways that these longer hitters hit, because it's going to be different based on the course that they play. So even though JT has a red flag in fairways gained over the past 100 rounds, he is not someone who I am disqualifying. Same for Dustin Johnson. But of the two, I prefer Justin Thomas because DJ's form, while probably overstated with how bad it is, it's just not as good as Justin Thomas's. And so from that reason, I feel safer building a DFS lineup around Justin Thomas. I would feel safer betting Justin Thomas, but frankly, my win simulations don't show a lot of value on JT. I have him at 6.8% to win over 10,000 simulations. It's not what you need for someone at 9-1. Whenever a course doesn't require distance, you basically have more golfers in play, and that increases volatility and that decreases the advantage that the best golfers have, the best and longest golfers have. Now, again, I still want to prioritize the quote unquote better golfers, which sounds obvious, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's like, hey, this guy can't chip, but you don't really need to chip because you just, hit the ball off the tee wherever you want, and then you can hit a wedge or a short iron in, to 6 feet and make the putt. That's not really what we have at Copperhead. So from that perspective, I'm prioritizing all-around golfers, and so I want to focus on JT to lead off my FanDuel lineups for this week. But I really like Victor Hovland as well, both from a betting standpoint. He's my favorite bet at the top of the board, but also from a daily fantasy standpoint. No real red flags in his profile aside from Bermuda putting, but these greens are overseeded, so it's not strict Bermuda. So I don't really factor in Bermuda putting quite as much as I typically would. But he does rate out as a good value, actually an even value at 21-1 for me in my win simulations. But amazing off the tee, amazing with the irons in the 98th percentile over the past 100 or over the past year when adjusted for field strength and recency based on my database. What he really struggles with is putting, but when you adjust his performance for recency and field strength, he's really not that bad. And what you can see here is really balanced off the tee. No other golfers have quite this level. He's one of 3 golfers in the field, along with Scotty Scheffler and Martin Laird, to rank in the 69th percentile or better in driving distance gained and fairways gained over the past 100 rounds, according to FantasyNational.com. Why I like that this week is on the scoreable par 5s, you're going to need to make your birdies and possibly eagles on the par 5s. And so you should have the distance to score in the par 5s, but you also should have the We should know that he has the accuracy to stay in play off the tee on shorter holes, and then the elite approach play makes him a standout play on the par 3. So I kind of don't see any issues with Hovland aside from the fact that he hasn't played here before. We have seen some golfers fare pretty well in their debuts. So I like Hovland. Paul Casey, two-time consecutive winner here at Copperhead. I don't really dislike him, but I'm not going to build my lineups around him because we have Hovland and Connors right around him from a daily fantasy standpoint. Connors is coming in super hot. We can see the great tee to green play. We can see the great strokes gained off the tee from balanced driving. Not a good putter, so very similar to a Victor Hovland mold, but I kind of am just leaning toward Hovland. I've seen it for longer, so that's kind of where I am with him for this week. I'll flip over here now to just the full field. I know it's a lot to look at, but kind of break things down tier by tier. I can filter this by the golfers with a salary of $10,000 or above. I have a few names highlighted in green. They're not the only plays I like, but they are some of my favorites, including JT, who I prefer to DJ straight up. Victor Hovland, Corey Connors, I think pretty from a course fit and current stat standpoint. It's hard to say that Paul Casey doesn't fit from a course fit standpoint because he's won here twice. But for me, the super recent form is driving me more toward Hovland and Corey Connors. Russell Henley is someone who I'd like to spotlight because he fits what we're looking for. I'll clear this out and just look at Russell Henley because I like him as a bet at 33-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. My win simulations have him at 3.5% likely to win, so there's value there on him at that current number of 33-1. He's the best, actually, just the straight up best value according to my model for this week. But if we want irons, he has them. He is in the 99th percentile. Once you adjust his performance for recency and field strength, he's pretty good around the greens as well. Not necessarily the best off the tee, but still 70th percentile there. And this is the thing that is most important for me this week. We're seeing him in the 88th percentile in fairways gained, 15th percentile in distance gained, but that's kind of the right recipe for me this week. So Henley, great building block on FanDuel at 10,500. Also someone who I have every intention of betting basically as soon as I log off here. But Henley, someone I like a lot. And at 10,000 as well, I'm going to show Ryan Palmer. Again, doesn't fit from like a fairways gain standpoint, but also doesn't lose as much leverage because as some of the longer hitters, because yes, he's long off the tee, 77th percentile, but he is not someone who's 95th percentile and above and who gains all of his leverage. With distance, it's not really what we see with Palmer. We see really good numbers across the board from him in all four strokes gain stats. I have him at least 75th percentile in all of them. That's why he's got all those green dots. So for me, Ryan Palmer, even though doesn't really kind of jump out as a great course fit, a good fit, and he has made both cuts here. So kind of helps ease some of that concern based on the fact that he's not like a shorter hitter and he's all of a sudden getting a huge leg up. At 60-1, he's a great bet as well. I'll jump to the second tier here. It's a little bit light at the top. I do like Chris Kirk. He is in great form, lots of really good finishes, and he does it with the ball striking and really the tee to green, just across the board, good tee to green. The putting's not quite as good. He gets a lot of help from playing in some tougher fields, so his putting looks a bit better. But he's 89th percentile in bogey avoidance, so I like that. Kevin Kisner is more of that prototypical, hey, it's a course where you don't have to be super long. So I like him from that angle. Kevin Stroman, Charles Howell as well. Charles Howell's got some good finishes, but the iron play in super recent events hasn't been amazing. And I kind of never really play golfers or bet golfers who have red flags in approach because as we talked about, it's super important. It's super predictive. It's not 100% predictable by any means. Golf never is. but in my experience, it's pretty predictive, trailing only strokes gained off the tee, which makes sense because the longer hitters are going to gain strokes off the tee, and you don't really lose distance week after week. Your irons, things can get a little bit out of sorts in a given week, but I'd still rather bank on iron play than anything else. Despite that, Charles Howell is someone I have interest in at a salary of $9,300 on FanDuel, but overall, I'm not that intrigued by the 9,000 range. There are a few more names just below that in the 8,000 range who I would probably rather just kind of build around. Doug Gim is one, Zach Johnson, John Huh. ZJ is someone who should fit from a course fit standpoint because, as we can see here, not the most accurate golfer anymore, but 67th percentile in fairways gained to tee. And 97th percentile in bogey avoidance. So he's not really going to like gain distance and birdies, but that's not what the goal is necessarily this week. That's another reason just to remember whenever you're looking at past results, recent results, like where did they play, and how does the course suit their game? It's super important to keep that context in mind. That's why I really don't look at finishes at all. To be honest, I just look at the underlying data because that's more important. It's going to help us make better decisions in the long run. And that way we're not chasing top 10s because, frankly, for a golfer to finish top 10, unless they're a star, they had a good week for them, right? And that kind of naturally means that they're going to regress unless you think it's the start or the continuation of a hot streak, which they kind of do exist in golf, but eventually they're going to scale back to their baseline average. And historically, from the research I've seen, you can really only trust that with younger golfers who are making a lot of adjustments and figuring things out. Whenever you see that for older golfers, kind of should, take some caution. So for ZJ to be missing cuts but still having good data, I'm all right with that this week. I will highlight, though, on the Finder, one play on FanDuel, Lonto Griffin. He's 7,500 for his salary. Not super likely to win, but all things considered, for the salary and for the stats, he fits. Again, he's got the red flag and fairways gained ranking in the 23rd percentile, but 92nd percentile adjusted strokes gained approach. Not the best wedges, but like a good putter, good on Bermuda. Again, these are overseeded, but for me, Lonto kind of opens up everything on FanDuel. You can play JT. You could possibly do like a JT DJ Lonto start and possibly feel pretty good. But for me, Lonto kind of opens up a lot from a daily fantasy standpoint, and that's super, super welcomed with, the two studs, yes, but more studs than that just below. I'll show my win simulation model in a little bit more detail here, compare that to the betting odds on FanDuel Sportsbook. But JT and DJ, as you would expect, are the most likely winners here, but it is not enough really at their odds. I don't disagree with their odds being 9 and 11 to 1 respectively, but they're not likely enough to win for me to want to start my card there. Instead, I'm going to go with Victor Hovland at 21 to 1. He's a fair bet. Usually I look first at the expected value just to see what things look like. I don't only bet based on the model because the model's not going to be perfect, but it has done very well historically. So, of the top few guys, Hovland is where I want to start. Tyrrell Hatton, his odds must have lengthened because he was not a betting value for me, but he makes a lot of sense. And then Russell Henley again, just a standout value, 3.5% likely to win at 33 to 1. So he's the best value. Overall, the question from Thomas Bain, overall higher points, Hovland or Patrick Reed. So if we're talking fantasy points, I like Victor Hovland over Patrick Reed. He has a game that's more suited for this course. The one drawback for me would be that Reed has done well here. Hovland hasn't played here, but I can throw those guys up on the Finder real quickly. Hovland and Reed. Reed's always tough for me because even though he's got a great short game, he's like not accurate off the tee. I always feel a bit nervous with him with the driver in his hand. But this number here, this basically shows what your scoring is relative to the field average you play in. It's adjusted for the field you play in. They're very similar overall. How they get there is a bit different. For me, approach differential, I'm going to prioritize the guy with the better irons and with the better driving stats because, again, those are easier to predict week after week. So for me, it's Hovland. I see the case for Reed, so it's a little bit of a backing away answer, but I'm going to say Hovland, but I wouldn't fault anyone for going Reed. And then another question from Mike. Gim, Lonto likely chalk in this range. Yeah, Lonto is going to be chalky on FanDuel because of his salary. I don't think that he will be prohibitively popular, though. Even at 7,500, I don't anticipate that he will get up to 30% rostered. I wouldn't expect that. Doug Gim, possibly. I can pull him up real quick as well. And Lonto for comparison. But, Gim, a plus player when adjusted for the fields he's played in over the past year. Good tee to green, good with the accuracy. He's one of the golfers I like in the value range. I don't think he'll be chalky, though. I think there's a lot of names down there who kind of get mixed in together. So I wouldn't say Gim would be super chalky. Lonto, definitely chalkier on FanDuel. So I think I covered everything for this week. Again, some of my favorite bets going to be Victor Hovland. Still Corey Connors to a degree, but I liked him a lot better when he was 26-1. Russell Henley, Ryan Palmer, Kevin Stroman, both showing some value here. As for long shots, not that intrigued just because we do have some bigger names this week. But that's all I have for today. And now I'm going to bring on Jim Sonis, and he's going to get ready to talk about my favorite sport, baseball.
Yeah, obviously, your favorite sport. We are officially 1/100th of the way through the season, Brandon, as far as you're concerned there. I would say also one thing benefiting Lonto on FanDuel is, from a popularity perspective, is you don't see as much analysis around FanDuel as other sites. So if there were to be a guy who would slip through the cracks, I think it's a situation like Lonto where he's specific to FanDuel because there's just less analysis out there. People tend to focus on another site. That might help Lonto be not quite as popular, I think.
Yeah, and like I said, we rarely see value golfers be like as chalky as the studs. I wouldn't be surprised if Lonto's like top 5 on FanDuel in popularity, but I don't think it's enough. And also, like, he's a good golfer.
Yeah.
And so
wasn't there a situation like I don't remember what it was. There was like someone over the fall who was in a similar situation where they were like super undersalaried. We may have had like a bet on what their roster rate would be. I don't remember for sure if this actually happened, but I'm pretty sure it did.
It was Brennan Steele.
Yes.
He was minimum salary.
Do you have, like, I know this is on the spot. Do you happen to have what his numbers wound up being in front of you?
Not in front of me, but I'd have them somewhere.
Well, I'm not going to make you look for it. But anyway, I think that I don't think he was actually that bad from a roster rate perspective. So I would say probably good to go on Lonto as far as if you're worried about popularity and stuff like that. But
yeah,
either way, he's a good play regardless.
Yeah, you do prefer DJ to JT though, still, right?
Obviously. I mean, for tournaments. For cash games, I'm going to go with JT. Take the easy route there, but given people seem to be turned off of DJ, I think for tournaments he makes a lot of sense. But I think we have a couple head-to-heads. So I was going to say good luck to you. I'm not going to say that because I need to win these head-to-heads. I also still need to make up ground in our actual head-to-head, the bobble hat. So bad luck? I don't know. Whatever. Either way. Thanks. Appreciate the handoff here, Brandon. Good luck this week, I guess.
Yes, sir. Have fun talking baseball.
Oh, yeah. Brandon's favorite sport. It's time to talk some baseball for tonight. And it's a fun night to talk MLB DFS because we've actually got a lot of really good pitchers on this slate. You look at the player pool over on FanDuel.com. You got Max Scherzer at the top, Lucas Giolito, Walker Buehler, Christian Javier. I think Javier is actually an ace. So to me, it's a slate where you have 4 aces. That's awesome. That also means I really don't want to look at value plays. So I'm sure throughout the questioning for today, we'll have some questions about some value pitchers. In general, I'm going to say no. I think Anderson is okay. It's kind of a bad slate, though, for value plays. You want to focus on these big four smiling faces up here as your focal point for DFS. Feel free to get your questions in today. Talking tonight's MLB DFS slate. It is a 13-game slate. As a reminder, no matter where you are watching, you can get your questions in to get set for tonight's MLB DFS slate. FanDuel, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter. Get those questions in. We'll take them live here on air for today. Get you set for tonight's slate of MLB DFS. We can talk pitchers, stacks, one-offs, value plays, strategy, process, whatever you got questions about, we'll answer it live here on air for today. In case Brandon did not mention this, a reminder, we have our draft stream coming up this week. That is on Thursday and Friday. I know everyone else is doing a draft stream too, but hey, where else will you get JJ Zacharyason's projections live during the show? The answer is nowhere. So make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages for our draft stream. That's myself, Brandon, JJ Zacharyson, and also Ryan Williams making his FanDuel debut, FanDuel and numberFire debut. That'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to introducing all of you to Ryan, who is tremendous. So Thursday and Friday going to be a lot of fun. Thursday, 8 p.m. Friday, 7 p.m., breaking down the betting, DFS, and season-long implications of the draft. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching this video right now. And our first comment comes from Alvin, who says, Brad Miller is batting leadoff for the Phillies. Hallelujah, Alvin. That's great to hear, because the Philadelphia Phillies are one of my favorite stacks for today. As we go here to the hitting tab over on the spreadsheet, they are facing Carlos Martinez. He's in the... I've historically called this the Bartolo zone, but I think I might need to retire that phrase because Bartolo, I was going to say, is no longer with us. That sounds grim. He's here, just not pitching. The Bartolo zone, though, if you're like an old solo shot listener, is a guy who lets up a lot of balls in play and a lot of hard contact. That's the kind of pitcher I've been stacking against over and over and over again this year. It's worked out pretty well, so I'm going to keep on going there. And Martinez firmly in the Bartolo zone, a 14% strikeout rate so far this year, just a 6% walk rate, which is good for him, good for us for stacking as well, though. 11.3% barrel rate against. That bodes well for the Phillies. Martinez mostly will struggle. Actually, we can use anyone against him, but definitely do give a boost to lefties facing him. And as Alvin mentioned, I'm going to put Giolito in here so we know what we're working with from a salary perspective, as Giolito is my top pitcher for today. We're going to scroll down to the Phillies. We're going to plug in Brad Miller. We're going to go Didi batting fifth, and I want Bryce because I always want Bryce. 2,900 left. That's a little bit dicey, but I can make that work, I think, for today. So I would say Brad Miller, lead off, a core play for me for sure today. Thank you, Alvin, for pointing out this joyous news. Mateo, 2 questions. Is the roof open in Arizona? Also, is Kelly worse against left-handed bats or right-handed bats? They've been pretty good with keeping the roof open in Arizona for today, and I would have to assume it will be because it's actually really nice in Arizona. They've kept it open when it's been like 95. So my general assumption recently has been that the roof will be open. Today, it is 72 degrees in Arizona. That means it's not quite as good for hitting as it usually is because it is a little bit colder, but it also means they're going to keep the roof open. So I think it's a net win there overall. 72 degrees, not ideal by any means, but still high enough where we can feel pretty okay about the hitters there. Let's look at Merrill Kelly's numbers. I'm going to combine last year and this year. It's not actually going to matter. He's actually stackable against, if that's a way to phrase things. Stack againstable. There we go. Stack againstable for both righties and lefties. Let's go here to go through the exercise, show you to find this. Go to splits, click on the splits tool. For FanGraphs, we are going to make this be 2020 and 2021. We're going to group this by career. All right, so overall, you can see here he has a 19% strikeout rate and a 45% hard hit rate. My goodness, man. Against lefties, hard hit rate goes up to 47%. The strikeout rate goes down to 18%. So that does mean that we're going to favor lefties. However, even against righties, the strikeout rate just 20%, the hard hit rate 43%. Those are still really good numbers. So although you give a slight edge to lefties, righties are still really good against this guy. So like you're not bumping down for another Tatis by any means. You're not bumping down Will Myers, who I really like as a righty, facing Merrill Kelly. So although lefties do better, I don't think it matters. I say you just use everyone here. The good thing, if we're talking about this from a splits perspective, is that the lower salaried guys we'd hypothetically want to use. Is this the right day? Did a bunch of lineups just come in? Wow. Okay. The guys you'd hypothetically want to use for value on this Padres team are a lot of lefties. I'm not really into Eric Hosmer anymore. The ground ball rate has come way back up, fully erasing all the gains he had made previously. But Jake Cronenworth, $2,700. Let's pull up Jake Cronenworth over here. Typically batting sixth. Pretty good spot in the order for him in such a good lineup, batting lefty. He has a 3.9% barrel rate this year. That's not great, but you go back to last year, numbers, 10.5% barrel rate with a low strikeout rate. That's pretty good. Although the barrel rate has not been there so far this year, I still feel pretty good about using him. Let's check to make sure the ground ball rate's not up. It's actually down. So I think that Cronenworth is going to be a staple for me. I would rank him above Brad Miller if we're looking just strictly for value plays. So I think that Cronenworth going to be a staple for me. $2,700. They're both actually the same position. So you do have to kind of choose, but I think that Cronenworth definitely someone worth prioritizing for today. The Padres actually have three guys who are pretty enticing from a value perspective here. So we'll clear this out and build a Padres stack. We're going to go 4, 5, 6. I know I just talked about how I don't like Hosmer. So I don't really want to do this, but like he's $3,000 in the lineup that I want to stack. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I try to have like some self-respect, which means I'm not going to use Hosmer for today. We're going to pony up to get Machado and Tatis. If we do that, 28-25, I can probably make that work. The one issue that I'm seeing with regards to my top stacks for today is that there is some positional overlap. So like the Padres, you've got Cronenworth and Hosmer at first base. You've also got Miller at first base for the Phillies. You've also got like everybody else who plays for the Phillies at first base between Hoskins and Real Muto. So, and then you've got Tatis, Gregorius at shortstop. There's a lot of overlap there. I am anticipating that will be an issue for me for today, having so much overlap between those positions. So that's going to make things tough for sure. I am still willing to deal with it because I think that they are the top two stacks. But like from a meshing perspective, that's a little bit scary for me. Jesus asking for a top pitcher for today. It is this guy, Lucas Giolito. Although I will say, you could make a strong case for any of the top four pitchers. And by the top four pitchers, I mean Lucas Giolito right here. I would say Walker Buehler's number 2. We've got Javier number 3, Max Scherzer number 4 for me. The reason Scherzer is lower is that his salary is higher at $12,000, but mainly because the Blue Jays are really good. It's kind of the hitter-friendly park in Dunedin. So those are a couple of check marks against him. And because I have really good alternatives, I don't have to force it with a tough matchup because Giolito's facing a Tigers team that's been decent this year, but they do strike out quite a bit. Javier's facing the Mariners, similar, decent this year, but they do strike out quite a bit. Buehler's facing the Reds, decent this year, but they do strike out a bit. And the reason I think that Buehler's number 2 is that he's gotten better recently. He's been using the cutter his past 2 starts. I think that's pretty intriguing. So I have Giolito 1, Buehler 2, Javier 3, Scherzer 4. And I think I'll be focusing on mainly just those 4 guys for tonight, specifically the top 3 for sure. Hopefully that helps you there, Jesus. Alvin, Astros, Orioles, and White Sox are 2 teams I see people liking. Do you like any of them? Okay, so the Astros are facing Marco Gonzalez. Historically, he's been a guy who really limits hard contact. It appears that's not been the case so far this year. So let's pull up the numbers here for Gonzalez and see what's going on for him. I know he's made some changes. Let's see what the changes here in my notes. Cut back on his cutter usage this year. Okay, so there actually is a tangible change because the cutter was kind of a focal point for him previously. Hard hit rate kind of high, barrel rate kind of high. Strikeout rates down. I think the Astros are fine. They're not in my top 3 stacks for today, but I can understand why people would be going there. Gonzalez just doesn't like. It's weird. I've always had a tough time stacking against him because he just doesn't let up a lot of hard contact. But it does seem like it's possibly shifting so far this year. The velocity looks okay. I don't know. I think the Astros love makes sense to me, Alvin. can be okay with that. Orioles facing Corey Kluber, I can get on board with that. The reason that I didn't have the Orioles in my top 3 stacks for today is because I find it a lot harder to stack them when Anthony Santander is out. He is my favorite player on that team, like from a talent perspective, by a pretty wide margin. So when he's out, I downgrade that entire team quite a bit. So they're fine, especially for one-offs. I just do downgrade them with Santander being out. The White Sox are facing reading Urania. Yeah, that's fine. He's been doing a good job of limiting hard contact so far this year. In the past, has been a good ground ball pitcher. Let's pull up the numbers here for Urania so far this year. See what he's been doing. Looks like the numbers overall a tiny bit better. Yeah, higher strikeout rates, higher ground ball rates, lower barrel percentage against. Let's see if there's been some changes in his pitch mix here to lead to this. Velocity's down. The pitch mix actually isn't that different. Oh, so his velocity down on his four-seamer, but it's actually up on his slider, even though he's throwing it less. So I would say the best numbers on Urania are going to be the numbers for this year. The numbers for this year say it's an okay stack, but not a priority. So, Alvin, I would say I'm not going to turn down any of those stacks personally. I just don't rank them as high as the Padres, Phillies, et cetera, et cetera. So they're all fine. I just like the other ones more. Jason, thoughts on Montas? Okay, so Frankie Montas is a value play for today. Let's go to all. I think his salary is like in the $7,000 range. He is $7,400 facing Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a high strikeout team. That tends to be good for pitchers. Let's pull up the numbers here. Montas, I know it's a 23% strikeout rate so far this year. I believe the swinging strike rate is pretty much in line with that number, so I'm not expecting a massive tick upward. At 12%, that's not too bad. Montas, defensible option. The issue he's having is he's letting up a lot of barrels. That's pretty scary. The ground ball rate, not super high. He seems like someone who's probably going to be pretty high variance. The strikeout rate not quite high enough to me to overcome the issues with hard contact. So I'm not going to get there personally. I don't think it's a bad idea, Jason, just not what I'm going to use. I would be wary of the hard contact, but against the Rays, people can do well. So I won't talk you out of him, but I'm not going to use him myself. Diffuse, would you prioritize more in a Yankee stack for cash games, Urshela or Sanchez? I can never prioritize Gary Sanchez in a cash game because the strikeouts are way too high. So Urshela for me for sure, just because Sanchez strikes out way, way, way too much. Jesus likes Montas as well. So it sounds like people into Montas. Like I said, I can see it. I'm not going to be there myself. I understand it. I can see it. Not going to use it because I want a little bit more strikeout juice, but it's defensible. Alvin, would you rank the Mets over the Yankees? So the Yankees are facing Bruce Zimmerman. I like them quite a bit. The Mets are facing Garrett Richards. The reason I was lower on this is that Richards was limiting hard contact so far this year. He walks more guys too. That's a little bit annoying. So I'd probably go Yankees over Mets. I think the Mets are a pretty good option. I think the Mets are better than the Astros, Orioles, White Sox group we were talking about before, but I would put them below the Yankees for today. Mike says it's a little cool in Los Angeles, so he likes Bueller. Yeah, so 64 degrees in Los Angeles for today. If you look at the rest of the slate, that is low. And honestly, we're at the point in the season where because it's finally warmed up across most of the U.S., you're going to see park factors and temperatures pretty much in lockstep. That's because temperature is a big driver behind park factors. So now that we've got most of the country heated up, you can use like full season numbers and park factors more confidently than you typically can. So I would say that's a good thing for sure. It's a benefit for Walker Bueller. Temperature is not the main driver of me liking Bueller so far for this slate. So I wanted to show you why I like it here. We're going to dig into the pitch mix here for Bueller, specifically over his past 2 starts. When you look at Bueller's numbers from last year, this year, whenever, you're going to see that I clicked the wrong link. You're going to see that he gets the most whiffs when he uses his curveball and his changeup. His cutter. His curveball usage overall this year is up. The cutter usage was super low in his first 2 starts, but the past 2 starts, 22%, 19%, that's a big number. It's a big increase. And when you look at his plate discipline data, you're going to see the swing and strike rate shockingly spiked when he decided to lean more on that cutter. So when I'm looking at Walker Bueller, I'm expecting closer to what we saw in 2020 versus what we've seen so far in 2021. Last year, a 29% strikeout rate. If you give me a 29% strikeout rate against a team like the Reds who do strike out, I'm going to expect a pretty good output. So if we judge Buehler based on just what we've seen so far in 2021, I'm not going to rank him above Christian Javier. I'd probably rank him below Max Scherzer as well. However, I think that what we've seen in 2021 is less than what I'm expecting out of Buehler going forward. Therefore, Buehler will be my number 2 pitcher for today behind Lucas Giolito. You can see here the salaries. Buehler a little bit lower salary than Giolito, not facing a DH. He's actually the one pitcher in this 4 horsemen of the apocalypse who are not facing a DH for today. That's a good thing for Buehler too. The reason I can't put him above Giolito is that the Reds are pretty good. I think they're a decent offense, especially against righties. So I'm not really itching to use pitchers who are facing them. I just think Buehler happens to be good enough where I can still tolerate that. So it's Giolito 1, the high strikeout matchup with the Tigers, what puts me there. Buehler 2. I like Javier 3. He's looked really good so far this year. He hasn't gone, I think, more than 5 innings so far. Let me fact check this. Yeah, 5 innings. However, he would have gone longer than 5 last week had Kurt Suzuki not single-handedly just torpedoed his pitch count. They had a 12-pitch plate appearance. I had used Javier in DFS that night, so I was tracking him pretty close and watching on the MLB app, and you just see foul ball, foul ball, foul ball, and I'm just going nuts the entire time. He still got 9 strikeouts, and I think he was actually the highest scoring pitcher on that slate. He beat Buehler by a couple of points, so I was annoyed, but he still paid off. So hopefully there's no Kurt Suzuki type line or plate appearances here against Javier for today. I think he's number 3 ahead of Scherzer. Again, just the matchup for Scherzer, really annoying, combined with the salary. That's going to keep me on Javier as my number 3 option for today. So I've got about 10 minutes left here if you want to get more questions in for tonight's slate. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter to get those questions in. Make sure you subscribe there as well. Hit the like button on YouTube because that does help us out quite a bit. Other stacks we have not discussed yet so far today. Did touch on the Yankees. The other top options for me are going to be the Phillies and the Padres. We've talked a little bit about them. So let's talk about the Yankees. Let's go over here, check out if their lineup is in yet. I would assume it is because it seems like everything came in the 5 minutes when I was talking to Brandon earlier. Oh, no Yankees yet. Of course. Why make things easy when we could instead make them hard? So we'll go here. We're going to pull up Giolito, put him in there. Let's refresh this just in case baseball press is behind, which has definitely never happened. We'll refresh it. We're going to put Giolito back in as our pitcher. We'll pull up the projected order for the Yankees. Oh, there, put Ketchum in there for me. How about that? Appreciate it. All right, Yankees lineup. Mentioned before, we were talking about Urshela versus Sanchez. I'm always going to pick Urshela just because the strikeout rate's so much lower. We're going to put Hicks in there. I know Hicks is struggling, to say the least, but it's always been a guy who's been better against lefties and righties. We're going to put those 2 in there. 29.75, that's not too bad, especially when we consider that Brad Miller's low salaried. We got Cronenworth at a low salary. Will Myers at a low salary. The Yankees probably mesh better with the Padres than the Phillies do. I actually think that the Yankees mesh better with both than they both do. We get some value plays here between Urshela. If you want to go with Urshela and Sanchez, it does make it tough because it means you're locking up a catcher / first base, and that position is pretty valuable for today, but it does give you some salary flexibility. So let's keep Judge and Stanton in there and go with Sanchez over Hicks as part of the stack. I just like to have them in the correct order there. Okay, so that's 3,100 left. Second base, shortstop, outfield, utility. So we could go with a Cronenworth. We could still get Tatis in there, I think, and Myers. I think we can make that work. So the Yankees and Padres mesh pretty well, especially if you're okay, taking some risk on Gary Sanchez. Let's go to Aaron Hicks's page here because I think that I'm guessing sentiment on him is probably not going to be all that enthusiastic based on, I don't know, reading Twitter from Yankees fans. They seem to be not the biggest fans of Aaron Hicks, but want to look at the numbers here. And let's go. So if we get 2019 numbers, that should be long enough. Let's go 2019 through 2021 to get a large enough sample. 2019 to 2021. We're going to group this by career. And we're going to go versus left-handed pitchers. The ISO 167, 23% strikeout rate, 39% hard hit rate, 40% fly ball rates. Let's get rid of that and go versus righties. Hard hit rate much lower. Fly ball rate about the same. Strikeout rate higher. The ISO is actually higher. I wouldn't think that's actually very legit. So if I'm choosing Aaron Hicks versus a lefty or Aaron Hicks versus a righty, I'm going to have him versus a lefty for sure. So give me Aaron Hicks in this spot, assuming he does wind up batting third once again for the Yankees. Question from Alvin. Oh, actually, first from Mike. Quintana versus Rangers. The walk numbers on Jose Quintana so far this year really, really, really high. And I think it's worrisome in part because you get a lot of guys on base, but more so because it just drives a pitch count in a hurry. For Quintana so far this year, a 20% walk rate gross. That's not super encouraging. And I think one of those starts was against Texas. Yeah, against Texas last week, he walked 4 guys there, which means they also just saw him. I think that Quintana is he's not someone you cross off immediately because he's a high strikeout pitcher, or at least this year he is, facing a high strikeout team. But the walk rate is so high, it puts a pretty big cap on his ceiling. So I'm not sure how deep he'll be able to go in the game if he's walking 1/5 of the batters he faces. That's why I'm lower on Quintana for this matchup. Would you include Matone in a Phillies stack? I believe he's batting 8th for today. Scroll down here. Yeah, batting 8th. Facing Martinez. Let's pull up the numbers here from Matone and see what kind of profile we're working with here. In general, Alvin, I would say, as like a rule of thumb, no. I hate using guys batting 8th with a pitcher behind them because they're just not going to get a whole lot to hit. So that's a really frustrating thing for me. Minor league profile on him, looking at high A, 104 ISO, 145 ISO in a small sample in double A. Doesn't profile as being a super powerful guy. He has hit for power. He's had an 11.8% barrel rate, but that's probably 2 barrels, maybe 3. 2 barrels. Yeah, 2 barrels so far this year. I would need to see more to ditch my assumption that he's not going to be a big power guy. So for right now, I'm going to say no. When you combine the fact that he is batting 8th in a National League lineup in front of a pitcher with the fact that he didn't hit for a lot of power in the minor leagues, I'm okay glossing over him. I also don't really want to include Herrera because I don't want to root for him based on the past stuff with him. So I think with the Phillies, I'm mostly focusing on the top 6 in the order. Bohm is a guy I prefer very much so against lefties because he doesn't put the ball in the air enough against righties. So I am kind of limiting myself when I say I think the Phillies are kind of stuck with the top 5 preferably, but 6 if you must. Maybe if you don't mind rooting for Herrera, you could put him in there. I really don't want to use him personally. But it is tough. So with the Phillies, you don't have a lot of flexibility, especially when you're considering the fact that you probably want to use Cronenworth or Hosmer in a Padres stack. And that forces you to use a first base. Real Muto and Hoskins are both first base as well. So it is difficult to stack the Phillies with the Padres. I think you can make it work. Maybe you just don't get to Cronenworth. Maybe you don't use Hosmer. Maybe we're looking elsewhere. But, it is tough. Let's look at Bohm and see if he's been playing better recently. Maybe I can talk myself into him here while we're on air. Got the numbers here for Bohm so far this year. Overall for the season, his barrel rate is 6.9%. That's not very nice. League average is, I think, 8.7% so far this year. So below average. He should get better as the year goes along. He can swipe some bags, but not the best start, and especially against righties. The numbers for him aren't that intriguing. So I would say if you can, Alvin, I would try to stick to the top 5 guys in the Phillies order. It's just I think that's kind of where things really do fall off for them. So Phillies, the top 5 guys. Padres, top 6. I think Cronenworth, assuming that he bats 6th, would be the next guy there. Let's see the projected lineup here. For the Padres, sees probably Profar batting 7th. Oh, Caratini batting 7th. Yeah, so probably top 6 for the Padres as well. So it's a tough night. Maybe that means we should be more receptive to Gary Sanchez because he's he is a salary saver batting 7th. But I don't know. I think it's a tough night for me to get below the 5th or 6th spot in the order for the Phillies just because there's some guys I don't want to root for down there. There's not a lot of power down there. Struggling batters. To me, it really is all about the top 5 of the Phillies. I am very okay using batters lower in the order when I have a reason to think they have a lot of upside. It's tough for me to talk myself into them with the Phillies. So top 5 for the Phillies, preferably top 6 or so for the Padres. I guess we can check out Caratini's numbers versus righties since the start of last year. See if we can be okay with that. So I'm okay using another catcher / first base because, of course, why would we make things easy on ourselves when everyone is catcher / first base for today? All righty. 145 plate appearances, 34%. Hasn't translated to a lot of power. I'm guessing probably, let's say, blind guess, 3% barrel rate here for Caratini. 3%. All right, cool. We'll work with that. So probably not going to get there if I can avoid it. It is a night where we don't have a lot of choices, and there is a lot of overlap with the positions. So try to find ways to make things mesh. It's not going to be easy, but I think we have to do it for today. Yosh over on, looks like Facebook. Any interest in Brewers versus Castano? So I like using, Twitch. Sorry for Yosh. I am okay using batters against Castano. The reason I couldn't recommend the Brewers as a stack, like a full one, is because their lineup is really bad. I will say, though, let me make sure that Tyrone Taylor is actually in the player pool here before I talk about him. Yep, $2,200. Okay, so Tyrone Taylor, $2,200, batting leadoff for today for the Brewers. He's actually a guy who has had some power in the minors. As we pull up his numbers here, this would be obviously going back a little bit because didn't have minor league numbers last year. But if we look back to 2019, 192 ISO, a 226 ISO, also in AAA back in 2018. Gotten some stolen bases. He's had some barrels last year. He's very small sample this year. I would say one-offs, Yosh. I think that we can get there. Taylor, $2,200 for today for the Brewers. That works. So one-offs, yes, I am good at the Brewers, especially like if you need someone to make it work, make those lineups mesh in the other teams. I think that Tyrone Taylor is definitely someone I'm willing to use. Full stacks is tough. Hira is facing a low strikeout pitcher. That's kind of his really big issue. So bump him up as well. I would say like Hira is a one-off. Taylor is a one-off. Garcia lost a lot of weight over the winter, and I hadn't really seen good numbers from when I initially looked last time. I want to check back again to see if it's gotten any better. It seems like he may have gone a little bit too far, potentially. Good for him, losing weight. But actually a 14% barrel rate. That's fun. Not good results yet, but the barrel rate's pretty good. So maybe a couple one-offs here between Taylor, Garcia, and Hira. I can see that. Just tough because Castano, the one thing he does really do well is keep the ball on the ground. So you said 1, 3, 4, 8 are the ones you like. Let's look at Reyes' numbers. I don't think you'll need to get there just because the savings you get via Tyrone Taylor. Pablo Reyes. So just for funsies, let's look him up here before we close up for today. AAA, actually not bad numbers. 257 ISO back in 2019. 5 stolen bases, 27 years old. It's not like he's super young and coming up, which is a good thing because it means he's older. I think that's actually a positive. Okay, Reyes could work too. I would say probably stick to Garcia, Taylor, and Hira, but I've seen worse numbers than Reyes, so it's okay. I think that works. Yeah, I think that they're a fine stack, but again, the risk is there because that lineup is really, really, really bad. But Castano is the kind of guy we do want to stack against, given the high volume of balls in play against him. Good question, Yosh, over on Twitch. That is all the time that we have for today here on the MLB Fantasy Live Q&A. Big thank you to Brandon Gdula for the lead-in, talking PGA. Hopefully things go well from you from a betting and a DFS perspective for the Valspar Championship. Follow Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. I'm on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. Reminder, we are back once again later this week with our NFL Draft live stream, Thursday, Friday, talking betting, DFS, season long, getting implications there from JJ, Brandon, and Ryan Williams, and myself talking draft Thursday and Friday. I am here again tomorrow as well for our MLB Q&A. That is every weekday at 4 p.m. So lots of incentive to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. And thank you to those of you who have done so already. Also, a big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for today. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A.